couple of neologisms. One of them is lifestyle design. Lifestyle design is the deliberate creating of the life that you create the way you want it, your life to live. And a lot of people don't do this, and they don't do this for many reasons. But we're going to look at each one of them and how to turn this around, and how it also relates to, what has happened the last couple of days and weeks with everything that we see in society going on and so forth. And it becomes more and more important. Lifestyle design actually really becomes more and more important, and we're going to talk about this. So the very first thing to understand is that it used to be that when you were born, whether female or male, into a family, that usually, depending also of course on the gender, but usually you would take over the business of your parents, whatever business they had. So if they were farmers, you would take over the farm, and many generations lived in the same house, and that was quite normal, okay? And as we get into the modern world, people got kind of like sucked into that matrix where they were like, okay, instead of taking over the farm, that might going to go to university, to college in the city or into the nearby town or the best city if it's possible, and then you would learn a new trade, and that would then become your profession. So there's kind of like an evolution of living in the village, in the tribe that you're from, or then living on a farm. And then basically the third kind of wave was which is the last wave that we had, where people went from the farm into the city, learning some kind of trade, becoming a doctor, an engineer, whatever, architect, or whatever you wanted to learn. And then from that university, you could stay with the university and become a teacher, or you would go then into private or public service. That was kind of like how it's been going basically the last 100 years. And what's been changing is that a lot of people, especially young people, are basically becoming famous or getting reach on the internet, and thereby getting kind of like a new lifestyle, you could say. Okay, so they're actually traveling to interesting places, living in other countries, learning cultures, having a blast basically in a lot of ways. And this whole kind of like Bali, Thailand, Mexico culture, that is also part of it. Or people that have become YouTubers, and they live on a catamaran and travel the world that way. So you see that slowly starting to pop up and becoming ever more present, because also great content. But it's also a fundamental change. It's basically the fourth wave, or you could almost say the fifth wave of living. And but they kind of like fell into that. It wasn't that deliberate. It's more like people that started to make content and became successful, and from that they kind of like it made that evolution. And I have a suggestion, which I call lifestyle design. It's basically, instead of going into it by accident, what would happen if you first and foremost decided how you want to live, the circumstances, the environment, the people, basically completely defining how you want to live, and then reverse engineering that and making sure that the work you do serves that image, or that lifestyle, rather than the other way around, which most people do, is find a work and then try to fit a little bit of the lifestyle that they want into that work environment. And that causes a lot of depression, a lot of problems, a lot of burnout for most people, and unless they really like their job. Or you do your own business and you run that business, but the problem is the amount of space you have, the amount of time and amount of energy and amount of resources to really live the way you truly want to live is actually very small. And what I'm saying, that with lifestyle design, you turn the whole thing around, and instead of focusing on the material aspects and being brainwashed by the matrix that you need millions of dollars and euros, whatever, in order to live a better life, that is a lie that we bought into. And that's even the lie that kind of like even a lot of the bro culture people spew and everything. And I see there is another way to do this, okay? But it's not an easy way, but it's definitely a way. So the more technology gives us ability, 100 years we didn't have this ability. The more it gives you ability, the more you can decide how you're going to use that technology for your benefit, right? So, and the thing is that if you say, I want to live in a house near the beach and I want to enjoy, for example, surfing, let's say, or going to bars and cafes and not have a fixed daily schedule, for most people, this seems unreachable and it seems almost too far fetched. And it seems like even if it were their perfect lifestyle design, it could be something else, working with animals, whatever. There's anything that you can think of that would be your perfect way of living with the perfect people around you, perfect environment, perfect, sun, whatever. It seems out of reach for most people because they've been too much fed by the idea that only the matrix can give you those answers. But actually, you can use the matrix by the tools that were given to you through the matrix and turn the whole thing around. So basically, I'm going to get into the comments a little bit later. First, I'm in my flow. So basically, when you say, I want to live near the beach in a nice house, go to cafes whenever I want, have no fixed work schedule, and so forth. So you define that. And then you look at what's needed in order to live that life. And the interesting thing is nowadays you have more and more opportunities and more websites, applications, and tools are popping up which allow you to do that fairly quickly. So for example, let's talk about house sitting, right? So, like babysitting, there's also house sitting. And so if you're 20 years old and you don't have the resources and means to buy yourself a house at the beach, then you could do house sitting for someone who actually has a house at the beach where you can, stay for a month or 2 or 3, taking care of their dogs and cats, and you would have exactly the same lifestyle. And at the same time, if they have Wi-Fi and internet, you can work on a business or an idea that could actually allow you to then build your life in a way that you're not even dependent on being a house sitter. So, and a lot of people don't realize that. And a lot of things, it has a lot to do with also the ability to let go of fear, which you have to do kind of like vipassana and spiritual work on yourself to lose the fear. And thereby you will feel much more inclined to follow your lifestyle design rather than following the matrix. And so, again, it started with, peasants working for the king. Then it became farmers where the children took over the farm. Then it became children that went to universities to find work. And now we're living in the time where you are, through technology, you can be more flexible. And now the last wave is what I'm calling is lifestyle design. You choose the way you want to live, and then you reverse engineer to look what you need to do to live that way. So that's kind of like the last wave we're living in. And before the AI takes over and completely destroys everything. But so you're right now in that last wave of, let's say, employment, where you can actually decide the way you want to live. And AI and all these tools give you the ability to quickly move into that direction. And so you say, okay, I want to live like that at the beach. Then you use AI and technology and internet to quickly realize that without necessarily having the resources, but being resourceful with what's out there, and then quickly moving into that and using that as a platform, kind of like that new lifestyle that you're living as a platform to make that more permanent, more flexible, and more free. So and actually, a lot of policies in the world are supporting that a lot. So, for example, the digital nomad visas now in Thailand and other countries, even Estonia now also has that. There's a lot of countries supporting that. I think Italy has that now. Spain has that now. So you're seeing that more and more and more and more. it in a way. And now is the time basically to do this. For me, it was van life. I realized I lost my fear of traveling alone and really not knowing where I'm going. Then I found the van very quickly. And people sometimes ask me, are you not fearful traveling, on your own like this? I'm like, no, absolutely not. I enjoy it. And then there's very few lifestyles that I could imagine for me that are better than this. I'm sure there's like two or three that I could, think of, but this is like really, really good for me. I think there are parts which could be improved, but in reality, I chose this. So this was purposeful lifestyle design, where I said, I want to live like this. I want to live like this. And so I live like this, and then I reverse engineer what I need to do in order to live like this. And I think to change that mindset from I'm a slave to the matrix system, I'm a slave to what has been fed to me, how I should be doing things, instead of I'm the doer of things and I decide how I want to live, and then I find the technology and the way to live like that and make it possible. And some people really, it has only to do with the fear. The more you lose the fear, the more you're able to actually act on it, which is very interesting. So the more you lose the fear, the more you actually have an ability to act on it, no matter what your resources. Because some people actually live their dream life, although they have very few resources. And the thing is that with technology, it actually becomes ever more easier. Even like Starlink Mini. I have Starlink Mini on my van. It allows me to be so much more flexible. So technology allows you that flexibility, which, 10 years ago you just didn't have. Nocturnal Domain is still subscribing me. This is this. Sometimes I don't understand why haters subscribe me in order to hate. I never understood that, because it's actually the exact opposite of lifestyle design. So rather than think about how you want to live and doing something about it, you're wasting your time in my stream by hating on me. I don't. It doesn't clock with me. I'm too intelligent to understand that. Because he says delusions of grandeur, also known as grandiose or expansive delusions, are a type of delusion characterized by an inflated sense of self-importance, power, or wealth. Self-proclaimed can also be honest bye-bye. It's basically a pure toxic metaframing, and it's because that person is severely unhappy in their life. That person is severely unhappy in their life, and they are looking for others to suppress them in order to feel a bit better about them. It's basically the try to diminish someone else's sexual value because you're so fearful of not procreating and not surviving on your own. There's a lot of subtle psychological energies, which are not that subtle actually, which force you to behave very toxic in that way towards others. But once you understand it, and to be very clear, I only accept it, or no, accept is the wrong word. I only tolerate this on my channel because I realized when I tested this that my channels grow much, much faster if I get a higher messages per minute. So I tolerate it. And my goal is actually libido empowerment. And by being well exposed on social media, I get more libido empowerment. And I see that I get very interesting people write me, and it becomes like a form of my lifestyle design. But in reality, if I would meet some idiot like Nocturnal Domain, I would not give them even one little piece of attention. Not even one little piece. For the algorithm, it's good. In real life, I would completely ignore them. Whatever they say, I would just go away. I would completely ignore them. Just so we understand why I tolerate it on my channel is because it serves the purpose of my goal. And I noticed that channels that I had or that other people have where they don't allow it, it actually limits the reach of the channel, unfortunately. So you kind of have to deal with that on that level. But these people are highly toxic. They're highly unhappy. And it's very important to distance yourself from them, just so you understand that's why I'm tolerating it. For anybody who follows my content and wonders like, why do I accept it? Because I have, for example, on my German channel where I get a lot of people subscribing, people were like, why do you accept that? Why don't you just ban the people and so forth? So it has that kind of purpose. Um, and that's pretty much everything to do lifestyle design. And the good thing is that artificial intelligence nowadays allows you to do very, because before it was like you needed to give 100% of output units in order to get one input unit. So it's basically, or you could reverse it, like 100 input units to get one output unit. So it was like you had to put 100 hours in to earn 10 euros. Okay, let's just say, okay, as an example. And now it's like with artificial intelligence, in a lot of ways, you give very little effort input and you get a lot of effort output. So, for example, in programming, you need 5 minutes to program a whole like minimal viable product application for any idea that you have. That didn't exist like 3 years ago. So these tools are giving you the ability to do lifestyle design more than ever. But a lot of people make the mistake that if you don't reverse engineer this, if you don't go like, this is how I want to live, and I'm using those things just as tools, you're going to be slave of the actual social media and the tools. And this is the big problem. This is why I give it a term, and this is why I explain how I define it. Because otherwise, you are with your computer the whole day, but you're sitting in, I don't know, in some tropical island, let's say, but you're constantly slave to that matrix. And only by doing lifestyle design and reverse engineering, you will realize that the first thing that comes first is, how do you live? How do you feel? Are you loving yourself? All of these things. And if you don't reverse engineer it, you are sitting on an island. You already have, a lifestyle that you want, but you, in your mind of the program matrix mind, you're like, I need to get more and more money. I need to have millions. No, you already have that lifestyle design. And there's that kind of like that little story about the person which was super rich and came to the dock and saw the guy like drinking his beer, and he was like, well, if you just did this and that, then you could be super famous and make money. And the story kind of like continues, and at some point is like, and what would I do then? Well, then you could sit here at the dock and drink your beer and not worry about anything. So it's like, oh, this is what I'm doing already. So lifestyle design is about understanding that about having that understanding and the philosophy of living, that you say you want to live in a certain way, and you reverse engineer it to live it immediately and not just in 10 years and dying in the process, you could almost say. And this is what a lot of people now do. They go to work that they don't even like. They work 10, 20, 30 years. They die before they ever get to live their dreams, and so forth. And that's why a lot of, young people then can decide, they want to do van life or whatever, with very cheap vans, and just, live a certain life. And, but there's very few people still. There's very, very, very few people still, because they never understood this on an energetic, spiritual level, where there was like, okay, I can always live like that, and reverse engineer the whole thing, kind of. I don't know if reverse engineering is the right word, but like look at it from the other side, basically. Yeah, so, and you have to understand a lot of things. You have to understand fear. You have to understand how to get rid of fear. You have to understand toxic people, how to get rid of toxic people or use them. If you don't, you're going to be slave to what you're doing. So if you, for example, say, I want to be an influencer, but you didn't deal with understanding fear and toxic meta frames and why the trolls and the haters are like they are, you're going to become emotional slave to them, and you're not going to really enjoy your life that much. Because although you have money and you have influence and stuff, you will feel like you are a slave to your emotions. So there's a lot of things that I'm talking about that are part of that escaping the matrix. It's literally not just running low on batteries. So I'm just going to say bye bye. But see you soon.